Hi everybody, Golden Era Bookworm here, and welcome to my 100K special video. As requested by many fans, I decided to do a library tour today for this video, as well as showing off the YouTube plaque that I recently received. So here it is, the YouTube play button. It's pretty cool. Just arrived today, opened it up with my kids and my family. And the kids, of course, were mega excited. And I'm probably just going to hang it in the office. I just want to give a quick thank you to YouTube, of course, for sending this award out to me. It means a lot to me in that the work that I am doing in the bodybuilding community regarding the preservation of its history is being appreciated. So thank you to YouTube. So this 100,000 subscribers milestone and award from YouTube also means a lot more than that. This channel and its successes could not be possible if not for the support of my beautiful wife, who is always there for me, literally, even as we speak right now, holding the camera. And of course, without the support of my loving children, family and friends, who at times have had to put up with me and my demands while I am filming, interviewing, or studying, telling them to keep quiet and things like that. You know, it really is, there's a lot of people behind this, and you know, I couldn't be more thankful for the support that I've had over the last few years. Finally, of course, to you, the fans, thank you for your continued support throughout the 7 years of this channel's existence. There is much more to come on this channel, so stay tuned. As they say, this is just the beginning. So firstly, I just want to go through a couple of the trophies that I have, which are really in my office because they are some of my favorite trophies that I actually have. Of course, some of you will remember that I have the 1947 Steve Reeves Mr. Pacific Coast Trophy, which he won just a few weeks before he actually famously won the 1947 Mr. America competition. Of course, I have it proudly in this office because, you know, it's just a beautiful piece that motivates me and inspires me from one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. So another trophy that I haven't actually shown yet is this extremely rare Sergio Oliva trophy. He actually used to sell these a very long time ago. It's made out of plaster, and as you can tell, when it got sent by the person who sold it to me, it was badly damaged. I mean, this person obviously had no experience on how to send these kinds of fragile trophies, but it's a beautiful piece, very rare, sold by Sergio himself when he would attend shows and things like that. It's a fabulous piece that I'm very, very proud of. So, of course, the Arnold statue that I purchased from Fabio Spuntarelli, if I'm not mistaken, from Italy, the Italian sculptor, also lives here. It's a wonderful piece. Only a few have been made in the world, and he's the official sculptor for Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's a wonderful piece. Of course, Arnold is a huge motivating factor in all of this. As many of you know my story, going back to the original story, this is the first magazine that I ever photocopied because I didn't even have the money to purchase a magazine. So this is my very first ever magazine, which tells the story of Arnold, everything that he did, how he trained. It's an old Weider mag with all his photos of his first wins, how he trained his legs, arms, everything. And I get, you know, this is really in summary how everything started. So having the, you know, this official statue of Arnold is truly a motivating piece in this office because it means so much to Golden Era Bookworm and its beginnings. So now I want to talk about the entire collection. Many people have seen, you know, the wall of bound books and bound magazine collections behind me. I just want to say that they don't just have a very high monetary value, but for me personally, they hold a high value because of the history that is found within. And this particular collection that you see behind me is valuable historically, especially because most of what you're seeing here actually comes from private collections of bound magazines. Now, it's very easy to find single issue magazines, well, relatively easy in comparison at least to bound volumes. But what you're mainly seeing behind here, especially in the upper half on both sides, are bound collections. This is quite rare, and that's why I hold them with, you know, special value in that they are very, very difficult to find, and to me they are the most valuable pieces in my collection. If we start here with this particular collection, which is the oldest collection I own, starting from the 1800s, as we can see here, these, what you're looking at, are the very first bodybuilding books and bodybuilding magazines in history, written, of course, by Eugene Sandow and his company. It's a rather extensive collection, especially of the Sandow's magazines. Now, I don't own all of them, but I own probably about half of them in bound condition, which is really rare, really hard to find, as well as many of his first books, Sandow's System of Physical Training, for example, the first book in history to use the word bodybuilding, right? There it is, Bodybuilding by Eugene Sandow, as well as many, many other books written by Sandow. Strength and How to Obtain It is also found here. There were 3 editions in total. These are wonderful pieces to this collection, and you know, just to make it even more awesome, as a book holder or book stander, I don't know how you call it, the book thingy.
Book stand.
Yeah, as a book stand, we have here an original Farnese Hercules, which was a trophy for the I believe for the Mr. Universe competitions, the NABA Mr. Universe competitions, that was given to me by Wayne Galash. A wonderful piece that goes quite well with the Sandow collection. Above the Sandow collection, we have another very historically significant collection here of Reg Park Journal, Vigor, and Iron Man, as well as Body Culture. All of these are from the 1940s and 1950s. The Iron Man are particularly rare in that they go back until volume 5, which is really hard to find in itself, let alone in a bound condition. And just, you know, let's just flick through some of these. I'm talking about them, but not showing you guys anything yet. Let's just show you the kind of stuff that we find within, right? So we say, oh, what a wonderful start. We've got here Steve Reeves on the cover of this January-February 1949 edition of Iron Man. Of course, full of information on how these Silver Era legends trained. There's a story on Bob Peoples, deadlifting, you know, and as we flick through it, we see some amazing covers from the past. Whoops, let's just get that cover up. Here's Leo Robert, Canadian bodybuilder from the 1940s and 50s, and so on. So we've got some wonderful bound editions here of Iron Man, of the Reg Park collection, Vigor, and Body Culture. Okay. So below the Strength and Health, which I'll talk about a little later, we've got a real Bronze Era collection here that kind of follows in parallel to the period of Sandow. When Sandow started to become very popular, Bernard McFadden also became very popular as a exponent of physical culture and propagated physical culture throughout the United States, while Sandow was very prominent in Europe, at least in the UK, whilst in the rest of Europe you had the French, specifically through Professor Despenay, the propagation of physical culture through his publications, an extremely rare here, where is it? La Rue de la Force, which is the King's this particular book, The Kings of Strength, has been now republished in English. This particular, there you go, you heard it from my wife, Les Rois de la Force, the Kings of Strength. This is the original in French. Now, I can tell you that very few bodybuilding historians in the world even have this particular copy. I have no idea how much it's worth, and I don't really care. What's important is that it's the original, written by Professor Desbinet, and catalogues the history of strongmen well before the 1900s. So we're talking 1800s, 1500s. Of course, you've got some images here of 1800s bodybuilders and strongmen. But before, we have images of Milo, right? The story of Milo and of Crete. And we've got other images that talk about physical culture through the Renaissance period, right? So we've got some real historical pieces here, which I'm very, very happy in owning. And of course, Professor Desbinet would go on to create his own magazine collection called La Culture Physique. I've got some of the earliest publications here, also in bound condition. As I mentioned earlier, we have Bernard McFadden, who was propagating in the United States physical culture, and he was, of course, propagating bodybuilding, but also nutrition, diet, and a healthy lifestyle. And I've got a nice collection here of McFadden books stretching out this way. Also of interest to some people might be quite a small but rare collection of Sergeant Moss, Staff Sergeant Moss. These particular small books, if I can just find some images of him. Yeah, doesn't matter. These are particularly hard to find books from Staff Sergeant Moss, and I'll put a picture of him on this particular video. There's a small collection of books that he came out with describing, again, Bronze Era style training. So moving from the Bob Hoffman collection, here we have now the Joe Weider collection of books, starting with Your Physique. And we have Your Physique, Muscle Power, as well as other bits and pieces. So let's have a look with Your Physique firstly. Again, these are very rare bound magazine editions. And here we have, for example, Dan Lurie on the cover. I really like those covers. Oh, there's Joe Weider himself. One of the rare covers of Joe. And a little earlier, we have, of course, Mr. America, Steve Reeves, right? Lovely artistry here. Maybe I should make these into t-shirts. So that's Your Physique, a very rare collection of bound Your Physique. Of course, the story goes that Joe Weider began his bodybuilding empire from his mother's kitchen. You know, stapling each edition. He sold 600 of them, and he stole York Barbell's mailing list and shipped it out, and suddenly his business grew. Very intelligent man. Then we have Muscle Power, for example, 1950 here. Again, a rare collection of bound editions. Here we have Clarence Ross, you know, just flicking through this very quickly. Norman Marks. Who else we got here? Oh, wow. Phenomenal Georges Boulanger. Beautiful physique. So these are some great pieces there from Muscle Power. And just a bit of history there. Your Physique finished in 1952, and Joe Weider at that time, his business was really growing. So he decided to split Your Physique into two different publications. Mr. America for focusing more on health and lifestyle, whilst Muscle Power was more about strength and bodybuilding. So being the golden era bookworm, I've been talking mainly about bound magazine editions, but what about bodybuilding books? Well, of course I've got bodybuilding books. We've got a huge collection of Arnold Schwarzenegger books right here, everything from his biographies to several editions of his more bodybuilding books like the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. Alongside I've got a good collection there of Steve Reeves books, and many of you may recognize, for example, Building the Classic Physique, but much rarer is Building the Classic Physique in the hardcover first edition. Along with that, I've got extremely rare, for example, Steve Reeves, A Tribute by Milton Moore, plus other very rare books of Steve Reeves there, which I haven't really talked about on this channel yet, but I will. And along with that, well, we've got many other books here, everything from Paul Anderson. We've got a collection of George F. Jowett, historical books from Professor Fair, a historian. Over here, we have a collection of books by Lou Ferrigno. That's his very first book ever, The Incredible Lou Ferrigno. We have books by Larry Scott, Loaded Guns, which I have talked about on this channel rather extensively. And a huge collection of books on Vince Gironda, those by Carl Coyne, which are exceptional books. I believe everybody should have these in their collection, available from vincessecretlocker.com, as well as Daryl Connon's books on Vince Gironda, and a huge collection of those written by Frank Zane, including the very rare Frank Zane Diaries. And of course, speaking of golden era bodybuilders, we have every edition of 3 More Reps, which showcases all the stars of bodybuilding and their workouts. I did speak about these on my channel, not all of them, just some of them. And we also have the iconic Pumping Iron first edition book, plus all the other editions there. And many books, for example, by Robbie Robinson, Boyer Coe, Lee Haney, Franco Columbo, Dave Draper, Mike Mensa, etc., etc., etc. All right, that was a little shorter. So I've shown you guys so far all the bound magazines and rare books that I have in the office. What you don't know is that there's 2 more rooms of magazines and books, right? And here now we've got the single issue, at least the start of the single issue magazine collection, starting with Iron Man at the top, Bob Hoffman's Strength and Health, and many of Weider's magazines at the bottom. So let's start with Iron Man. Here are some very rare single issues of Iron Man magazine, specifically volume 3 with Eugene Sandow on the cover, and volume 4, right? These are very, very hard to obtain, but other than these, volume 3 and 4, I have pretty much a complete collection of Iron Man, all the way from the very early 1940s up to 1985-86 when John Ballack took over, right? If we continue from that collection, we can see that by the 1950s, you know, silver era bodybuilding was really on its rise. And here we have, for example, who is that? Well, I can't recognize him right now. But we have these physiques much more different to Eugene Sandow, much more muscular, right? Still natural in my opinion, but of course, as we move further on into the 1970s, like here, Steve McCalloch, we can see the obvious transition of much more massive physiques. This one's from, for example, from January 1972, with the introduction of steroids in the bodybuilding game. Right, moving on to Strength and Health and the magazines that Bob Hoffman came out with. Here we have, for example, some early editions of Strength and Health. These are from volume 1, very, very rare. And we can see how back then these bodybuilders had this strongman look about them, right? They're very athletic, they're very strong, not too massive. And these guys used to wear these funny Roman gladiator leather shoes, right? With that strongman look that was, of course, made famous by Eugene Sandow. So that's some very rare Strength and Health editions. And again, it's an almost complete collection of Strength and Health, one of the most complete in the world. And as the years progressed, of course, so did the physiques, right? Here's Roy Hilligan, Mr. America, I believe of 1951, much more massive physique, right? And again, these are pretty awesome collection here because they actually came with the original envelopes. Again, these envelopes are like 75 years old now, so it's pretty awesome stuff. My wife's just shaking her head going, God, this guy even collects the freaking envelopes, right? Yeah, that's right. So Strength and Health, being part of your company, also were very much into promoting their athletes in the Olympics, right? Very important part of history there, at least with American weightlifting. We move now to Weider, right? With Weider, as I mentioned, the famous story, this is a collector's reprinted edition. Unfortunately, I still don't own the original. As I mentioned, Joe Weider initially came out with 600 copies of Your Physique. It was a very small little booklet, probably just this big, right? And he began his publication empire and everything, the IFBB and just bodybuilding in general, because he wanted to focus more on bodybuilding and less on weightlifting. And that's how this whole thing started, right? Again, an almost complete collection of Your Physique. All of these are single issue magazines. And yeah, if we just continue randomly, we can see more of these awesome mags. There's Floyd Page on the cover, right? What a massive rib cage he had, right? Those slabs of pec meat, Jesus Christ. So yeah, that's Your Physique. As I mentioned, with time, Joe Weider decided then to split Your Physique into the Mr. America magazine and Muscle Power, which then became Muscle Builder, right? In the meantime, he started off with Mr. America. Understand that this is just after the war. So he was promoting, just like Bob Hoffman, the importance of being fit and ready for war. And you can very clearly see this in these artworks on the front cover of these magazines. These, strong, burly men, stoic and just willing to go through hell and back, to beat the Nazis, to beat the Japs. No offense, but that was the mentality back then. A strong nation can survive a war. That was the whole idea, right? You can see right even at the top, a man's magazine, right? That's what Mr. America is. Be fit and strong for your country. That was the motto. That was the motivation back then. And we have to understand that the war had a great motivation in promoting bodybuilding, in promoting strength, in promoting the iron game. The war, really, the post-war struggles of depression, of malnutrition, of displaying this either weak nation or a strong nation helped in this development, right? And one could say in parallel, you see the emergence of comic figures. That's a whole other story, but all about these supermen that could help and save a planet or save a nation. All of this has to do with this particular theme, right? And as I mentioned, Muscle Power was born after Your Physique. And here is the very first edition with Jack LaLanne on the cover, right? October, November 1945. Notice the physiques are still relatively athletic, you could say, muscular, but not over the top. As time continued, of course, the physiques got bigger and bigger. Here we have, I don't know, let's pull this one out. Mid to late 1950s now, just before the advent of steroids, still strong, still fairly muscular physiques, not ripped, but you know, here's Mickey Hargitay, Mr. Universe of 1955. Moving forward, Mr. America promoted that healthy lifestyle. And here we have, for example, Leroy Colbert, right? The first man with 20.5-inch arms, as it states here at the bottom, right? Very famous bodybuilder from the 1950s. Mr. America was more about lifestyle and, as I mentioned, personality. Sure, there was muscle building, but you can see the top, personality, sex appeal. It was more about, yeah, not so hardcore bodybuilding, right? Finally, Muscle Power eventually became a Muscle Builder, one of the most famous and favorite magazines of, you know, that most bodybuilders would nowadays just remember, right? I remember it myself, right? And here, for example, there we go, Arnold, right? One of the best covers ever of Arnold there, right? Here's where Arnold just arrived in America, 1969, right? 1969 right there. And of course, very famous covers here. Here's Larry Scott, you know, and you can really see the difference now. Although these magazines portray health, happiness, vitality, right? The physiques are much more massive though. But Joe Weider was selling that dream, you know, come to California, build big muscles, get gorgeous women, live on the beach, live the dream. You know, that was what was being sold by Joe Weider, as opposed to Bob Hoffman, who was selling amateur weightlifting, right? So you can imagine that that kind of appealed to young men, especially during the sexual revolution of the 1960s. And that's what he was selling. And of course, bodybuilding exploded, right? Okay, now we're down in the basement. It's not so pretty down here, but there's still some really nice pieces down here that I'm going to show you. Here are some more collections that I would say that I believe are very significant. We can start off here, for example, with one of my favorite. And if it wasn't for this collection, for example, I wouldn't have been able to participate in the Arnold Netflix series as the archival researcher. Starting with Craft Sport Review. Now these are the very first magazines that I would say helped me at least participate as the archival researcher. Here we have volume 1 with Steve Reeves on the cover from the very early 1960s after he became Hercules, right? And of course, understand that these movies were the movies that Arnold would watch and later spark him, oh, perfect timing, right, to become the greatest bodybuilder of all time. There he is after winning the Mr. Junior Mr. Europe competition, right? Of course, after that, he would go on to participate in 1966 Mr. Universe, and as they say, the rest is history. Craft Sport Review chronicles the history of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's all in German, everything from his earliest training programs to his first Mr. Olympia wins, right? And I have a very complete collection of that, and that's what allowed me to become the archival researcher for Arnold's series. We also have Athletic Sport Review and Journal, also a great collection of magazines from Germany. Let's just grab some of these very early ones here. Here we have Larry Scott on the cover, and soon after, if we can just find it, we have, oh yeah, Arnold's very first Mr. Universe competition, right? He lost to Chet Yorton, and then would of course beat Sergio Oliva soon after. Well, in the Olympia. Okay, so that's the German magazines. We also have several from Spain. For example, here, Deporte y Salud, which stands for sport and health, right? Also in bound condition, we have Las Pesas, which is translated as the weights, right? Extremely rare, beautiful silver era collection here of bound magazines from Spain, right? Again, talking all about silver era methods. Look at that, training with a sandbag, incredible, right? So yeah, pretty awesome collection there of mags. All right, let's move over here. Now here's a very historical collection, in my opinion, and the current owner of Health and Strength, right? This is a Health and Strength collection right here. The current owner told me that my collection is even better than theirs, right? This one is from 1928. Now, I'm not claiming that this is the best collection in the world. I know there were better ones, but it's a good one. And from about 1928, I have every single issue of Health and Strength, which is a UK publication that began, I believe, in 1890s. I'm not exactly sure. 1898 or something like that. I'd have to look again. Actually, it's on the cover here. Well, maybe it's not. All right. It doesn't matter. It's one of the oldest publications in the world. And if we flick through, for example, this one that is about 100 years old, we can see, not quite sure yet. There we go. We can see the very athletic but thin physiques that we had back then, practicing muscle control, the light dumbbell system. The Dank system was one which involved the chest expander, so that's the Dank system, and many other different practices. The physical culture practice back then was based on the European practice of Turnen, right? And there again, I said, at the time, they only used to train with chest expanders, light dumbbell system, things like that, which was all based on the Turnen system from Germany, right? It had migrated with all the German and European migrants to America. They brought along this system of training, and bodybuilding began to spread. Back then, of course, it was called physical culture. So that is one of the largest collections of Health and Strength, all the way up to the early 2020s at the bottom. And yeah, it's a really good one. All right. What else we talk about? It's not so important. Here we have the Reg Park collection of magazines. Now, you could call the collection the Reg Park Journal, but it did change names over the many years, as we can see right here. Initially, it was called Mr. Universe because Reg Park had just won the Mr. Universe competition. That edition went for 4 editions, including a wonderful cover of Reg Park right here, but also, I'll just get that right so you can see it. There's a very famous pose by Reg Park, right? And one of my favorite covers is that of Steve Reeves here as well. His rival, of course, who won the 1950 Mr. Universe. As I mentioned, this particular collection only ran for 4 editions and later was renamed Muscle Man. That's the very first edition there, again with Reg Park on the cover. That ran, if I'm not mistaken, for 12 or 16 editions. And then finally it was renamed the Reg Park Journal. Of which we have the very first edition here with Alan Steffen. Oh no, my mistake. Alan Steffen comes later. That's Reg Park. That's Reg Park on the cover. Let me just take that out. That's Reg Park on the cover right there. The Reg Park Journal, the very first edition, right? And yeah, that ran through the 1950s. In my opinion, one of the best magazines on techniques of lifting, just like Iron Man, very much the same, and very much the same as Muscle Power, Your Physique, and Strength and Health. They really were awesome magazines back in the day. It's a complete collection of the Reg Park Journal. Not much to say about that, but it's an awesome magazine collection. As a final masterpiece, you could call it, we have here Illustrierte Sportzeitung, which stands for Illustrated Sports Magazine, if you will, in German, right? Or Illustrated Sports Newspaper, as my wife just corrected me, whispering in the background there, rolling her eyes to the side. Now, in all honesty, I've only just been recently contacted by collectors who obviously realize my passion for the Iron Game and its history, and they've been offering these collections, bound collections. Again, this one's from 1909, well over 100 years ago, 115 years to be exact, and prior, from the 1800s too. Now, as I've mentioned, physical culture as it became known in the UK and America, the original concept came from Germany, from the sport of Turnen, and it still exists today. And basically it's general sports activities that tone the body, calisthenics, gymnastics, that kind of stuff, climbing up ropes, jogging around, using light dumbbells, which later developed into bodybuilding. And here we have really some of the oldest true magazines that showcase all the different activities of Turnen. For example, wrestling, right? There it is, Illustrierte Sportzeitung, right? You have to be very, very careful with this particular. I'll have to just do it like this. My wife has to adjust it. There we go. As I mentioned, it was a sports magazine. But what I love about these magazines is that we actually see also the very rare advertisements of the equipment that used to be sold back then. Everything from ring weights, right? We have globe barbells that were actually adjustable with discs, and these bizarre looking barrel like barbells. We also have dumbbells that were adjustable with discs, as well as single dumbbells and bow shaped dumbbells. Really amazing stuff from that period. Right, so we actually see the kind of equipment they used to use. Again, it was all about sports performance. In this case, the throwing of the discus, right? So these athletic sports that you still see in the Olympics. Pretty amazing stuff. And again, full of images of sportsmen wrestling with all their awards that they've won, be it through weightlifting or wrestling or whatever. Full of information about the strongmen of the past, especially from the 1800s, right? I remember I just was opening this book and looking through it last weekend, and my brother-in-law screamed out, "Turnvater Jan," he said, right? And he came running to look at it. Everybody in Europe understands the history of physical culture, and if you go back in time, you understand that the history goes back to Turnen, and especially to Turnvater Jan, who's the father of Turnen in Europe, with his surname Jan, of course, or first name, I can't remember. But again, Here we have the whole history of, again, wonderful physiques that were strongmen or sportsmen. Eventually, this would become bodybuilding, right? It's rather coincidence that I come back to this page. So you have boxing here and fighting, and everything was considered physical culture, right? Everything was considered physical culture because sports or training in general cultivated the physique, right? Whether it was wrestling or lifting or playing a sport or running, anything, all of it was considered physical culture. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to own these books because I can really look back further, not just to the early 1900s, but even further back to the mid to late 1800s and really learn about the history of physical culture, especially as it pertains and happened in Europe. So really wonderful collection of several now hardbound magazine editions. Here we have other ones, right, that have only just arrived, and I'm going to be looking at these in due time. Yeah, so that was my library tour, and I really hope that all you fans out there have enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed showing you the various books and bound magazines and even trophies that I have. That's just some of them, by the way. And yeah, it's just kind of takes me back to the very beginning, you know, seeing my whole collection like that and explaining it to you guys. I really thank you guys for asking me to do this video. It's been very enjoyable for me as well. And of course, on the on thanking this, I want to just take this opportunity to thank everybody who supported me over the last 7 years to reach 100,000 subscribers and counting. And I want to, of course, bring you much more. The road to 1 million has only just begun, and I believe that we can one day get there. And of course, I will be sharing much of this information on my channel. Believe it or not, I keep saying it sometimes to some people, but I've only really shared the articles from Your Physique. I haven't shared anything yet on Strength and Health, Mr. America, Muscle Power, Muscle Builder. So there's so much more to this channel that I really want to start bringing, and even before that, right? So the history of Arnold, the German magazines and all that kind of stuff. There's so much to really talk about on this channel, and sometimes it's overwhelming. But again, I want to thank everybody for everyone's support. I hope you've enjoyed this video and this library tour, and if you have, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment. Now that you know what's in my library, what would you like to see regarding videos? Some people want bronze era, some want the silver era, some want golden era. I'm happy to bring it all to this channel, so just let me know. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you again, and this is the Golden Era Bookworm saying bye for now. Head to www.goldenerabookworm.com for the biggest range of classic old school bodybuilding books as ebooks, e-magazines such as Iron Man and Reg Park Journal, high quality bodybuilding posters of the Golden Era stars, merchandise and classic gymwear featuring Steve Reeves, Marvin Eder, John Grimmick, Reg Park, and many other Golden Era stars. For those wishing to build a classic physique, lose fat and build muscle, online training is also available. Collectibles such as rare autographed photos from the Golden Era stars are also available, and to collaborate, please get in touch. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Vince Gironda's approach to bodybuilding, his principles, and all these tips of wisdom that he has, I mean, there's so much stuff that probably hasn't been proven by science, and it will take science to prove or disprove Vince. But to be honest, these 3 books, I believe, which I call the Classic Physique Bundle, are the best books that Vince ever came out with. And they, of course, are the Wild Physique, the Master Series, and the Pro Series. Have a look at it this way. The Wild Physique, I believe, is like the ABCs of Vince Gironda's principles to bodybuilding. He teaches you the exercises and his principles, but how do you put them together? Well, the Master Series is a 14-month program of using all of these principles, all of the diets that Vince came out with, all of the exercises. And of course, the Pro Series was a book that he came out with later on, specially targeted for getting into competition. It's just these 3 books, as I call it, the Classic Physique Bundle, Vince's best work, and available, of course, at www.goldenerabookworm.com.